Hello and welcome to In Parliament. I'm Sharon Tong. Parliament is reviewing the Casino Control Bill. Second Minister for Trade and Industry S. Iswaran said the proposed changes to the bill aim to strengthen the legislative framework for the regulation of casinos in Singapore. He said that fundamentally the approach to regulating casinos remains unchanged and added agencies have gained practical experience from regulating the casinos over the past 2 years. Mr. Iswaran said it is imperative to continually monitor developments, anticipate trends and challenges and ensure that the regulatory regime stays effective and relevant.
The bill has 5 main objectives. First, it enhances the provisions for effective gaming regulation and streamlines regulatory processes. Second, it strengthens law enforcement levers to deal with the casino-related crimes. Third, it broadens our framework of social safeguards. Fourth, it refines the regulatory framework to give effect to the economic policy intent of introducing the IRs in Singapore. And finally, it improves tax administration for consistency with other tax acts.
Relating to law and order, the provisions will require casino operators to ensure that illegal betting activities and unlicensed casino marketing activities do not occur in the casinos. It will also create specific casino-related offences. For example, those relating to counterfeit chips, cheating at play, collusion and unlawful interference with gaming equipment. Also, the maximum financial penalty for serious breaches will be raised from the current maximum of 1 million to 10% of the casino's annual gross gaming revenue.
While the crime situation in the casinos has been under control, we are mindful of the vulnerability of casinos to criminal infiltration. Therefore, the home team agencies continue to be vigilant and proactive in seeking to enhance our levers to prevent, detect and deal with casino-related crime.
And among the provisions to improve social safeguards, the introduction of a new casino visit limit regime. The visit limit will set a cap on the number of times an individual may visit the casino each month. There will be 3 forms of visit limits. Firstly, individuals can apply to the National Council on Problem Gambling for voluntary self-imposed visit limits, while family members can apply for family visit limits. The NCPG will also be empowered to appoint a committee of assessors to determine whether a third-party visit limit should be imposed on a financially vulnerable person.
The actual visit limit imposed may differ from person to person, depending on each individual's circumstances. Individuals will have the right to be heard and the right of appeal. MSF estimates that some 4,000 to 6,000 locals could fall within this category of persons, requiring more targeted intervention through the imposition of visit limits. MSF and NCPG are working towards rolling out the visit limit regime by the middle of next year.
The bill's provisions will introduce a new section for the minister to appoint an evaluation panel. The panel will provide an independent opinion to the Casino Regulatory Authority on the ability of the IR operators to fulfill their economic obligations. Now, members of Parliament continue to raise concerns over the issue of problem gambling in Singapore. A total of 18 MPs rose to participate in the debate on the Casino Control Amendment Bill. Many spoke in favour of tighter social safeguards.
I do not think a simple means test is sufficient for this, but perhaps you can run a check with some other agencies. Singapore Power, for example. I do think if a person is unable to pay his water bill, I think he is financially wrong. This may be seen to be draconian. Some may say it's anti-human rights. But in this case, I prefer to err on the side of being conservative. I have not heard of anyone trying to make a case for a human right to gamble. But I do want to say that the financially challenged ought to be protected from the temptation.
The ministry might also want to consider to exclude those who may have records of having borrowed from loan sharks, unless they are able to prove that they are no longer in debt with such illegal moneylenders, or those who have been having payment arrears for housing mortgage or rentals or utility bills.
My concern is how the committee may find itself privy to such information. A person's credit record is private and confidential. It is one thing if the individual voluntarily submits such information, though I rarely think it will happen, or if family members provide that information. It is quite another if the committee receives such information from other sources and acts on it. It seems rather inconsistent that we are nowadays concerned about protecting personal data, but appear to be willing to allow personal information to be used without an individual's consent.
It should do away with the annual levy. $2,000 amounts to only a paltry $5.50 per day, and is equivalent to only 20 daily entry levies. Effectively, regular gamblers get a discount off their levy, while occasional gamblers have to pay a higher levy per visit. This sends the wrong message that regular gambling is preferred over occasional gambling. An annual entry levy, regardless of amount, would lead to a buffet syndrome. People would be incentivized to visit the casinos more just to get their levies worth.
Members also urged the government to act on other forms of gambling. These include online gambling, which has been recognized as a growing and popular form of gambling for those who are young and more IT savvy.
I would also like to know how the law intends to deal with new forms of gambling, such as interactive gambling services, as well as other modes of gambling outside of the casino, including online gambling, which can adversely impact the young. Unfortunately, the Casino Control Act does not cover this area.
I recently met one resident whose mother was a gambler. He had tried to stop his mother from gambling, but because of the prevalence of jackpot rooms in clubs, she still frequents such legal joints without having to pay entrance levies. These legal joints, some of which are available in the heartlands, provide gaming activities to the masses without the usual safeguards seen in the casinos. With the amendments to the Casino Control Act, is it time to also send a more consistent message to these jackpot clubs, which are part of the ecosystem of gambling? Shouldn't they be subjected to the same regulations or rules as the casino?
And some question the effectiveness of an evaluation panel when granting new or renewing casino licenses. The panel is tasked to ensure that integrated resorts operators continue to develop, maintain and promote the IRs as compelling tourist destinations.
A key reason for the government's decision to establish the IRs was for that it would be a significant benefit for the economy. There was an assumption that this would in turn mean the creation of good jobs for Singaporeans and business opportunities for local companies. With the IRs operating for more than 2 years now, it would be timely and useful to examine whether the IR's presence has indeed translated to tangible benefits for Singaporeans and local SMEs.
Can the government publish more data to substantiate the benefits? How many local SMEs and suppliers are doing roaring business with the casinos? What is their percentage share of the supply chain in dollars and cents? Can the government be more transparent in providing regular updates on gaming revenues and social impact caused by the casinos?
While others like Momin Kalang MP Denise Phua had stronger views linked to Singapore's eventual exit from the gambling industry.
I don't gamble, but I was told that the royal flush in poker is ranked as the highest hand in the game of poker. It occurs when a player has an ace, a king, a queen, a jack, and a 10 of the same suit. If you are lucky enough to get a royal flush, then you should be sure to bet the entire pot, because you undoubtedly win the pot with a hand. But I was also told about this royal flush that one's best chance to get a royal flush in a casino is in the toilet. So, sir, when we reach the expiry timeline of whether to renew or to grant new casino licenses in Singapore, let us remember this, that the chances of a holistic win, economic, social, moral, for Singapore in this casino business are as good as that of getting the royal flush. We should therefore work towards exiting from the casino industry.
The debate on this bill will resume tomorrow. Now, two other bills were also debated in Parliament today. Amendments to the Securities and Futures Act was passed to strengthen safeguards for retail investors. It also seeks to regulate over-the-counter or OTC derivatives. The changes will allow investors who have suffered a loss as a result of false or misleading statements to obtain compensation. This is regardless of whether the contravening person had gained a profit or avoided a loss. The Monetary Authority of Singapore's power to revoke licenses, enter and search premises and impose prohibition orders will also be extended. Finance Minister Taman Shanmugaratnam said the amendments will put Singapore's Securities and Futures Act in line with the reforms being implemented in many other major financial centres.
The proposed reforms to OTC derivatives regulation in Singapore have been designed to provide flexibility to respond to international developments and to take into account our local market conditions. I believe MAS has struck an appropriate balance in this approach, and the steps being taken will enhance the safety, efficiency and reputation of Singapore's financial markets.
In addition, the Financial Advisors Act has been amended to make financial advisors or FAs more liable for making false or misleading statements to customers. Previously, it was an offence to make a false or misleading statement only where it's made with an intent to deceive. With the amendment, the law will now cover all statements made by the FA firm, including those that relate to the features or risks of an investment product. The law will also cover any negligent or reckless dissemination of false or misleading information. It's also an offence if the FA firm has not cared to ascertain if a statement is true or false.
In formulating our proposed amendments, MAS's aim has been to improve the financial advisory process in a way that better serves the investor and develops a culture of advice over the long term that will benefit retail investors in particular. And in this regard, I strongly urge both the industry and investors to view the documentation process and the compliance costs that FA firms will have to bear, not merely as regulatory requirements, but as a process, as part and parcel of a process that enables FA firms to carry out their duties in the best interests of their clients.
The Singapore Accountancy Commission Bill was tabled for the first time in Parliament. It aims to establish the Singapore Accountancy Commission and a framework for the growth and development of the accountancy sector and its related fields. It will also provide for the registration of chartered accountants in Singapore. The setting up of the commission will put the accountancy profession on the same footing as the legal, medical, architectural and engineering professions, all of which are overseen by statutory bodies. And during question time, Finance Minister Taman Shanmugaratnam revealed that the Monetary Authority of Singapore is looking to tighten advertising rules for investment products. He said this will minimise the scope of advertising to mislead consumers. MAS is now following up with relevant agencies on the rules. In the wake of a crackdown last month on gold trading business Geneva, several MPs had asked if the government is taking more proactive measures to enhance consumer awareness. Mr. Taman said the MAS Investor Alert List, or IAL, which contains a list of companies not licensed by MAS, is publicly available online and updated regularly. There are currently 5 companies operating buyback schemes listed on the IAL.
Some companies are currently under investigation by CAD. The exact number of affected investors is not known at this point as the investigations are still ongoing. In the meantime, the public can refer to CAD's website for updates on the investigation. MAS will continue its efforts in educating Singaporeans on the pitfalls of dealing with unregulated entities and the risks of unregulated schemes such as gold buyback schemes.
The government will release a white paper on population in January next year. Deputy Prime Minister Chee Hean said the government has been engaging the public on population issues and it has received over 2,000 pieces of feedback so far, which will be taken into consideration as the government formulates and reviews population policies for the white paper.
The government recognises that population growth in recent years has outpaced our planned infrastructure capacity. We have ramped up infrastructure development in the areas of transport, housing and healthcare, and these are coming on stream progressively. Going forward, we will strive to better match infrastructure provision with population needs.
Moving to the issue of housing, Senior Minister of State for National Development Lee Hean says there will be some HDB blocks that will not be offered the lift upgrading program due to excessively high cost and technical constraints. This is even though the Housing and Development Board is focusing its efforts on upgrading the remaining feasible blocks by 2014. Mr. Lee said HDB will continue to look for solutions for these blocks.
LUP is a huge program. It covers 5,000 blocks and with a budget of $5 billion. So necessarily we have to set a financial cap on how much we can build and spend on each benefiting unit. This is so that we spend prudently and to maximize the budget. When this program was being executed, initially, actually, we encounter about 1,000 blocks that are very difficult to deal with because of the way that the flats are laid out and also because of the tight site constraint there is. But over time, we found solutions, technical solutions to some of these blocks, and we managed to reduce the number to about 200 today.
Mr. Lee also explained that the scale and complexity of each lift upgrading project is different, and this will affect the time taken for each project. It takes about 1 year between announcement and polling for most precincts and another 2.5 years from polling to completion. Mr. Lee added HDB tries to expedite LUP works without compromising quality and safety. Work is also phased to minimize inconvenience to residents where feasible.
For non-benefiting units, I'm happy to learn that the authority is willing to consider perhaps a relocation for them to enjoy a flat with a lift access. Would the ministry be able to consider offering a package that facilitate the relocation in terms of value that could be similar to the subsidy cap that is offered to each benefiting unit, which I believe is about $30,000.
Our focus right now is to complete, the rest of the eligible units by 2014. So for, very few cases of, as you mentioned, affected by severe mobility handicap, I think we'll look into them. But exactly what formula to use, what is the benchmark, and how we do it, we are still looking at the options.
Next, addressing the issue of bomb shelters in flats, Mr. Lee said the HDB has over time been improving the layout of bomb shelters. For example, it has reduced the distance that the shelter has to be built from the edge of the building, so there's more flexibility where it can be located within the apartment. The internal space of the shelter has also been reduced while still satisfying the requirements of the Civil Defence Shelter Act. Mr. Lee says it is a necessary balance between practical use and against wartime or times of tension.
While some private apartments and condominiums provide staircase shelters, for HDB to do likewise requires it to fully enclose its staircases. And this will incur high maintenance costs due to the need for 24-hour mechanical ventilation.
As HDB flats become smaller these days, and there's quite a lot of requests from residents or new home buyers who request for a relook at this policy and practice because every square footage becomes very precious real estate.
In peacetime, the home shelter space is limited in some users to storeroom and maybe to put other items. But I think in crisis, really, this is a place that will give protection to the household. In terms of, either prevent from direct shock or collapse, or even in the case of tremors, earthquake. So I think this is like buying a insurance policy. You only use it, you only realize its usefulness when the time comes.
Moving on, LTA only expects to bear an incremental cost of between $2 and $3 million in the cable replacement program along Circle Line. It will cover the cost difference for replacing existing cables with higher grade cables at stations which are more susceptible to water seepage. Minister of State for Transport Josephine Teo shared that the cable's replacement is planned to start in January 2013 and will likely take 18 months to complete. In the interim, LTA is working with SMRT to conduct more frequent checks, particularly at locations where risk of exposure to water or moisture is higher. Faulty power cables have been said to be the cause of 2 Circle Line service disruptions. Mrs. Teo was responding to non-constituency MP Yee Zhenjong on the lessons learned from the Circle Line breakdowns.
The laboratory tests following the Dakota incident revealed certain manufacturing defects in some batches of the CCL power cables, as well as damages in some cables sustained during the installation process. So some of it was manufacturing defects, some of it was during the installation process that created these damages. But I'd like to assure him that not all the CCL cables are defective. Nevertheless, for greater assurance of service reliability, LTA and SMRT has already embarked on a cable replacement program to replace all the CCL power cables that are on the tracks.
As for the downtown line, Stage 2 remains on track for completion in 2015. This is despite some tunnelling and station works along some part of the Bukit Timah corridor having met with adverse soil conditions. Transport Minister Lui Tak Yew said some contractors also had to restrict their working hours due to complaints about noise and inconvenience.
LTA is taking measures to keep the overall DTL2 project on schedule. For instance, it is working with the contractors at these stretches to extend project hours when and where possible. LTA is also exploring the feasibility of shortening the period of installation for track work and electrical and mechanical works.
The recent increase in electronic road pricing rates along the Central Expressway and East Coast Parkway is a result of a routine adjustment in response to traffic conditions. The Transport Minister said this would not lead to a reduction in road tax. Mr. Lui explained ERP rates are adjusted generally by $1 when traffic speeds fall outside the optimal range of 45 to 65 kilometers per hour. ERP was raised on the southbound CTE after Bradle Road and the westbound ECP as traffic speeds were below optimal. MP for Nee-Soon GRC Lee Bee-Wah asked if there were any plans to scrap the evening ERP along CTE.
I hear your call to scrap the evening ERP altogether, but we want to also make sure that we provide options to people who would like to have a smoother traveling experience in the evening. And if you look at what has happened over the past year since the changes to the ERP, during the period before 8 p.m., you actually had an increase in traffic speed northbound along the CTE, and after 8 p.m., particularly from 9 p.m. onwards, you actually had the speeds coming down. And so I think shortening the hours preserves the option that for those who want to have a smoother ride home, they can pay the $1, use it before 8 p.m. For others who choose not to do so, they can ride after 8 p.m.
I would like to ask Minister, are you encouraging residents to go back after 8 p.m. then?
I'm offering a choice to residents.
And finally, Acting Manpower Minister Tan Chuan Jin says whether the National Wages Council continues presenting quantitative recommendations depends on how the wage situation unfolds in the coming years. MP for Choa Chu Kang GRC Alex Yam pointed out in Parliament that the NWC had provided quantitative recommendations this year, which is a slight deviation from previous years. The NWC had recommended specifically that employers grant a built-in wage increase of at least $50 to workers earning a basic monthly salary of up to $1,000. The acting minister said while it is too early to know the full impact of the guidelines, indications from the Singapore National Employers Federation and the National Trades Union Congress are that employers have generally been supportive of this recommendation. Mr. Yam wanted to know if such recommendations, especially for low-wage workers, will be the way forward for the next 5 years.
We would monitor the situation. Obviously, like we said, the NWC is not a static institution. The measures put in place are really aimed at uplifting the wages at the various levels. So the recommendations that NWC put in place, while this year has been a slight deviation in specifying, not just in quantitative terms, but specific dollar terms. Whether this becomes a norm, I think a lot depends on how we see the situation unfolding over the coming years. If there continues to be a need for that, I think the NWC would consider in future whether to specify a quantum. However, I think as with all things, we will look at the situation to see how the income progresses at the different levels.
And Parliament resumes tomorrow. Good night.